Hello, whisperers. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy tonight's tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps more than you know. Now, dim the lights, and let's begin tonight's story. I took the job because it paid triple my usual rate. No questions asked. Just coordinates, clearance papers, and a wire transfer so large I checked the account 3 times to make sure it wasn't a mistake. The crew was small, just 4 of us on a converted research vessel called the Aurora's Wake. I didn't get much of a say in who came along. The ship's owner, Dalton Shaw, handled everything. Said he used to work in non-civilian maritime retrieval, which is just rich guy talk for mercenary salvage. Jewel, a marine biologist in her early 30s, was brought in for biological readings, and Lisette handled logistics. Cold as hell. Ex-military by her stance and the way she always kept a hand near her hip, even though we weren't carrying weapons. And then there was me, Reed, the dive instructor, hired muscle with fins. The job brief was simple. Dive to a location off the Azores trench, document anything unusual, and don't touch anything unless told. The map coordinates weren't near any known wrecks or cables, and the sonar imaging was glitchy as hell. Looked like a lump of metal surrounded by shadows, which meant it could have been a Russian sub, a deep-sea mining site, or nothing at all. We left at dawn. By 1600, we were tethering dive lines and prepping the rebreathers. The air was heavy with salt and static. Even the ocean felt wrong, too still, like the water was holding its breath. As I double-checked Jules's gear, she glanced at the monitor and whispered, "It's glowing down there. Something's glowing." I looked over her shoulder. The sonar showed a faint pulse, about 20 meters wide, soft and rhythmic, like a heart. I didn't say anything. I just adjusted my mask and went back to my prep. By 1700, Lisette made the call. We were going in, me, Jules, and her. Shaw would stay topside, watching the feed. Descent. We slid into the water like ghosts. The surface closed above us in seconds, blotting out the sun. No waves, no movement, just endless depth below. We dropped fast, using a weighted line system to stabilize. The light bars on our suits pulsed red as we passed 300 meters. At that depth, the blue fades from the world. Everything becomes green, then black. The water pressed in. I could feel it behind my eyes. Jules's voice crackled over the comms. Pressure steady, no leaks, readouts clean. Lisette didn't answer. She was focused, the kind of quiet that's used to gunfire and explosions. We descended deeper than I'd ever gone with civilians, past the thermocline, past the point where marine life thins out into strange, fragile things that drift and twitch like leftover dreams. You stop seeing fish, you start seeing shapes. The glow came into view slowly, a faint orange blush beneath the trench shelf. I stopped mid-drop, heart hammering. The shape below was impossible. A structure, round, seamless, not sunken, intact. "Reed, are you seeing this?" Jules whispered. We descended the final 30 meters together, drifting like dust. The dome was partially buried in silt, with coral growing across the outer edge like crusted scabs. It looked like a black steel egg, half exposed. Lights pulsed from within, soft and regular, like breathing. Then something moved behind the window. A thin limb, long, spindly. It rose slowly and waved. Not flailing, not random. It was greeting us. Approach. Jules froze beside me, eyes wide behind her mask. Lisette grunted, maintain formation. I want to sweep, exterior only. We circled the dome cautiously, propelling ourselves with short fins bursts. I kept my light low, trying not to disturb whatever was watching. The structure was at least 15 meters across, with no visible doors or seams. Just a single viewport and that soft light, humming low and slow. No rust, no decay, and no marine growth on the central shell. This isn't natural, Jules muttered. Metal this clean, this deep, no way. Keep the line tight, Lisette snapped. Something's wrong with our telemetry. I'm not reading our depth anymore. I checked my console. She was right. The digital readout flickered like it was being scrambled. Pressure was climbing slightly, enough to notice, not enough to panic. Then my ears popped. Hard. Too hard for the depth. We all felt it, a vibration. Low frequency. Felt, not heard, like the ocean itself had growled. Jules gasped and spun toward the window. There's another one, she whispered. I followed her gaze. Inside, past the glass, barely visible in the glow, another limb, a second figure, taller, still, watching, not waving. Retreat. Up, Lisette said, suddenly urgent. Back up. No questions. Jules hesitated. But now. We started ascending slowly, careful not to spook the pressure differential. Then the window flashed, just for a second. A flood of orange light filled the trench like a flare underwater. And the second figure moved. It didn't swim. It shifted like it was being poured forward. Then our headsets screamed. Not an alarm, a voice. It's been so long, it said. Not through the water, not from the surface. From inside the dome, from inside our suits. Please, come inside. We shot to the surface like hunted things, hearts thudding in sync with the ocean's pulse. Only one of us looked back. Jules, her voice trembled. It waved again. I didn't ask if she meant the first figure, or the second, or something else. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. The aurora's wake creaked and bobbed under a calm sky, but every little sound felt too loud. The slow drip of condensation from the rigging, the groan of a loose mooring cable, the clink of Jules nervously stirring powdered coffee she didn't drink. I stayed out on the deck with a blanket draped over my shoulders and a flashlight I didn't need, just watching the water, like I expected something to break the surface. Nothing did, but the glow was still visible below, faint as an ember, pulsing. Shaw barely said a word all night. He just sat in the radio room, reviewing the sonar feed on loop, like if he stared hard enough, the data would confess to lying. Eventually, around dawn, he knocked on the table and said, "We're going back down. Today. That thing's still active." I said no. Jules said no. Lisette didn't say anything, but she didn't argue either. She was already checking the oxygen mix on her tanks, like it was just another op. We geared up again. The sky had gone gray and heavy, like it knew we were about to make a mistake. Dalton Shaw wasn't staying on the ship this time. He wanted in. That was the deal breaker for me. "You're not trained," I told him. "And even if you were, going inside that thing's a death sentence. You heard it. You saw. Whatever the hell that was, something's living in there." He just smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I paid for this dive. I'm going inside." He handed me a secondary transponder beacon and turned away before I could say more. The water closed over us slower this time. We descended in silence, 4 figures in full gear, lit only by the cold glow of suit-mounted LEDs. I kept checking Jules's breathing rate on my monitor. Elevated, but stable. Lisette's was flatlined, not in danger, just unreadable, like she was holding her breath on instinct. As we neared the trench shelf again, the glow brightened, and the dome had changed. It wasn't buried anymore. More of the structure was visible now, extended, like it had grown overnight. A ribbed hallway stretched from the front of the dome like a tunnel, ending in a shape that wasn't there before. A door. It was open. We hovered outside it for maybe 30 seconds, long enough to feel the ocean shift again. The water around us grew warm. Not just warmer, comfortable, like it had been heated specifically for us. Every diver knows the cold past 300 meters is brutal and constant, but now it felt inviting. Shaw didn't hesitate. He swam forward and slipped into the hallway. Jules grabbed my arm. I felt her fingers clamp hard through the suit. "We shouldn't go in there," she said. "It's too clean." And it was. No barnacles, no sediment. The metal had a shine to it, like it was polished every hour on the hour. The glow wasn't from bulbs. It seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Still, we followed. The airlock didn't make a sound as it closed behind us. The transition from ocean to air happened in a heartbeat. No decompression chamber, no hiss, no sudden dryness. Just dry. Like the pressure flipped itself inward and the ocean politely stepped aside. I stood up inside the airlock, blinking through the visor of my helmet. The inside of the building felt wrong. Not just the design, though that was off too. The walls weren't straight. They bowed ever so slightly, like they were under pressure from the inside out. The floor was textured like skin, not slimy, not bone, something in between. "Environment's breathable," Shaw said through the comms, reading 20.9% oxygen, 1.1 nitrogen, stable. "That's impossible," Jules said. "That's surface air." Lisette drew her knife, not to use it, just held it low in her right hand, like she didn't trust where she was standing. I told everyone to keep suits on, masks tight, but we all felt it. The suits got hot, sweaty. It wasn't just the heat. It was like the material was reacting to the air, like we weren't supposed to be wearing them anymore. The first hallway was lined with fixtures, like wall panels, displays, but they didn't show data. They showed patterns, swirling, slow-moving visuals that reminded me of MRI scans crossed with jellyfish anatomy. They pulsed in sync with the light. Jules stared at them too long. I had to nudge her. We moved deeper. The dome branched into multiple rooms. One looked like a lounge, chairs, a table, even a row of cups still set out. But the cups weren't plastic. They were made from something translucent, glass-like, with fibers inside. Hair? We found the control room next. That's when things got bad. No switches, no keyboards, just a massive round chamber with a pulsing center platform. The walls curved up and inward, creating a dome within the dome. At the center stood a pedestal, about waist-high, slick with condensation, and veins of flickering orange light running through it like exposed nerves. Shaw walked straight to it. "No," I barked. "Don't." Too late. He touched it. The entire room hummed, low and slow, like a pressure wave rising. The light surged, orange flaring to deep amber. Something inside the walls began to move, slowly, like fluid behind glass. A shape, tall, thin, watching. Jules screamed. Lisette backed up, blade raised. I yanked Shaw back from the pedestal. The hum stopped. And then, on the far wall, a section of it opened, like a wound splitting open. Inside, we saw a diving suit, upright, intact. At least it looked like one, but it wasn't any model I knew. Too tall. The joints were wrong. The helmet was stretched vertically, almost horse-like in profile. It was connected to the wall by long strands, umbilicals made of metal and cartilage. And inside the faceplate behind the cracked visor, something was watching us. It blinked, once, slowly, and then smiled. The thing in the suit didn't move again. It just stood there, half embedded in the wall, bound by wet, twitching cables that pulsed like arteries under tension. The smile it wore felt deliberate, constructed. Not like it was happy to see us, more like it had learned the shape of human joy, but none of the meaning behind it. For a few long moments, no one said a word. The air inside the dome had a density to it, warmer now, almost humid, like the walls were exhaling slowly around us. I took a step forward before I even registered the movement. My hand was reaching out, idiot instinct, maybe curiosity, and I would have touched the glass if Jules hadn't latched onto my wrist. "Read," she said, sharp. "Don't." My head snapped toward her, heart suddenly racing. Her eyes were wide behind the visor, and I could see her breathing pick up in her mask. She was scared, but steady. She'd seen me do something I didn't intend to do. That shook me worse than the thing in the wall. Lisette shifted between us, slow and silent. She still hadn't spoken since we entered the building. The knife she'd drawn earlier was still in her hand, low at her side. Not a threat, just a habit. Her stance said everything. The predator in her recognized the thing in the wall wasn't prey. It was something older than that, something that made predators nervous. Shaw muttered something I didn't catch. He was already moving, toward the wall, toward the cables, one hand out like he was reaching for a familiar doorbell. I opened my mouth to stop him, and the wall slammed shut. Not a mechanical hiss, no alarm, no noise at all. It was just open, and then it wasn't. The seam vanished like it had never existed. We all flinched. The lights overhead flickered. Then the room hummed, low and heavy, like a diesel engine buried in concrete. That hum settled deep in my chest. My teeth buzzed. The pedestal in the center of the room flared orange again, this time brighter, and then it began to open. A vertical seam split down its center, slow and smooth. Inside, churning liquid, not water, not oil, something thicker. Suspended within were fine strands, filaments like nerve endings or microscopic tentacles, floating in lazy spirals. There was rhythm to it, not machine rhythm, biological, heartbeat. The pedestal pulsed once. The walls responded. Lights dimmed. The temperature rose another few degrees. My suit was starting to sweat. We had to leave. We all knew it. That kind of silent, group realization that happens during combat or house fires or shipwrecks. This is wrong, and we need to move. We pulled back. No one argued. Even Shaw, who'd seemed so mesmerized, followed without protest. We exited the control chamber into a hallway that hadn't been there when we arrived. The path bent upward at a slow incline, lit by pulsing strips underfoot. Not bright, not helpful, like emergency lighting designed by something that didn't quite understand what a human eye needed. The walls here were subtly ribbed. Each step gave underfoot slightly, like walking on high-density muscle or old carpet soaked in brine. The further we went, the hotter it got. I checked my HUD. Suit temp, 40.2 degrees Celsius. Warning, internal pressure rising. Jules was just behind me. Shaw came next. Lisette covered the rear. Every 20 meters or so, the hallway forked, 2 or 3 paths curving away into unknown space, some narrowing into crawl spaces, others yawning into black. The structure was moving, not like it was alive in the sense of blood and meat, but like it was rearranging itself around us, studying, adjusting. I paused at the next junction. Shaw muttered behind me. Which way did we come in? We didn't, I said. He looked confused. We didn't come in through here, I repeated. This wasn't here before. And that's when I heard it, a click, just behind us. I turned, and Lisette was gone. Gone. No scream, no light, no sudden movement, just not there anymore. Where she'd been standing, the hallway was now sealed. The wall looked like it had always been that way, seamless, curved. Lisette? I barked into the comms. No answer. Lisette, come in. Only static, and then breathing, not hers. Softer, slower, wet. Jules turned white. She looked back the way we'd come and started to move, but I grabbed her arm. No, I said. We move forward. We'll find another path back, but we don't split. She hesitated, then nodded. We climbed. The incline steepened. The lights beneath us pulsed more slowly now, like a slowing heartbeat. The heat was starting to get dangerous. Every breath in the suit felt damp and thick. We passed what looked like windows, long vertical slits along the left wall that revealed nothing but darkness behind them. Not the ocean, not machinery, just black, the kind of black that pressed back. Another junction, and that's when we heard it. Dragging, something was moving in one of the side corridors, scraping against the wall, heavy, unsteady. Jules whispered, "Lisette?" We stopped, held our breath. The dragging came closer, slowly. Then we saw it, a figure, too tall, too thin, naked, skin like translucent rubber stretched too tight. It didn't walk, it pulled itself, fingers dragging against the walls like suction cups. No eyes, no mouth, no suit. It paused, maybe 10 meters away, head tilting as if sniffing. And then it moved again. We bolted. No discussion, no formation, just instinct. The hallway curved violently and spat us into a wider chamber with high walls and a dome-shaped ceiling. At the far end, a large pane of thick, curved glass looked out into the sea trench. We were back in another viewing room. I ran to the glass. My breath caught. Outside, floating a few feet from the dome's edge, was Lisette's helmet, spinning slowly. Faceplate shattered outward. Jules let out a sharp gasp, covering her mouth. Shaw stumbled toward one of the walls and collapsed to the floor, clutching his head. "She talked to me," he whispered. "It talked through her voice. It said it needs a vessel, a voice, a perfect shape. She wasn't right. It's learning. It's printing again." His voice cracked on the word printing. I turned back toward the window. Something was moving again outside. A second figure, not floating this time. It was crawling across the ocean floor toward the structure. Its head lifted, its body elongated. It stopped near the glass and waved. It didn't blink. The thing outside the glass just stayed there, hand raised, wrist rotating in slow, unnatural circles, waving. The body wasn't quite right. The limbs were longer than they should have been, not stretched, but grown that way, jointed differently. The way it moved across the ocean floor reminded me of something insect-like or fetal, half-formed, still learning how to use itself. Jules whispered, "It's copying us." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was right. The figure drifted away from the window after a moment. It didn't swim, just shifted, like the water itself pushed it along. Shaw hadn't moved from the corner. He was rocking slightly, arms wrapped around his knees. "I think it took her mind first," he said. "I think that's how it starts, not the body. It figures out the mind, and then it builds the vessel." I crouched next to him. His suit had started to discolor around the seams, veins of black and blue spreading from the collar like oil under glass. His pupils were narrow pinpricks, almost reptilian now. "Shaw," I said, "what's happening to you?" He didn't look at me. "It made me touch it," he said. "It made me want to. And then it fed me pieces of itself. Through the hand. I saw things, images, wet, hot memories, all of them hungry. Why didn't it take you? "It is," he said, voice thin, "just slowly." The chamber shuddered. Not an earthquake, something internal, a pulse deep and resonant like a mechanical stomach preparing to digest. And then a door opened. It didn't slide. It didn't rotate. It simply peeled away, like a scab lifting off healed skin. What lay beyond wasn't a hallway. It was a room, a long, cylindrical chamber, dimly lit, filled with pods. Dozens of them, each one suspended from the ceiling by thick, semi-transparent cords, umbilicals, and each pod held something. Jules went first. She moved like she was sleepwalking, pulled forward by something her mind hadn't caught up with. I followed, slower, gunmetal floor soft beneath my boots. The pods were semi-organic, like thick sacks of resin or synthetic flesh. Some glowed faintly, lit from within by pulsing orange veins. Others were dark. Most held shapes that were only vaguely human. Malformed torsos, extra limbs, bodies that had tried to become something else and failed. But not all of them. Some were near perfect. One of them opened its eyes. "Lisette," Jules gasped. I stepped forward and looked into the fluid. The face was hers. Hair floated in gentle spirals. Eyes moved sluggishly, unfocused. Her mouth twitched. Bubbles rose from her nostrils. I slapped the side of the pod. "Lisette, can you hear me?" Her eyes snapped to mine. The scream didn't come from her mouth. It came from the speakers embedded in the walls. A high, rattling shriek, full of static and bone. Then her lips moved. I couldn't hear the words. I could barely read them through the haze. But I know what she said. "Burn me." Jules recoiled. Oh God, she's awake. There were more pods behind her. At least one held another figure that looked like me. The skin was wrong, too pale, and the eyes were open, fixed, but the face was mine. "They're not just mimicking," I said. "They're copying, printing." Jules stepped back, one hand to her mouth. "How long do you think they've been doing this?" I didn't answer. There were more than 24 pods, and more of them were lighting up. Shaw stumbled into the room. He looked worse. His face was streaked with tears and something darker, blue-black ichor leaking from the corner of one eye. "They were designed to survive the trench," he mumbled. "That's what this was. A military experiment, long-term habitation, Cold War era. Pelican 6 wasn't a lab, it was a womb." "A womb for what?" Jules said. He turned to face us. "New life," he said. "Something that could survive the pressure, the cold, the dark. They built the structure, but they didn't account for what was already down here. Something found it, something seeded it. Now it's breeding." The wall behind him pulsed. A pod next to Lisette's burst open. Fluid hit the floor in thick splashes. The thing inside tumbled forward, weak, twitching, still forming. Its face was partially hers, but the body was insectile. Long, sinewy limbs with fingers that ended in hook-like cartilage. The mouth opened like a gill. It gasped, then screamed. Jules pulled me out of the way just before it lurched forward. Shaw didn't move. The thing collapsed seconds later, too early, incomplete, but the others were waking up. Dozens of pods beginning to stir. The room smelled like rot and copper. My skin itched under the suit. "We have to go," Jules said. "Now." I didn't argue. As we backed toward the far corridor, I turned for one last look. Lisette was still staring at me, still alive, still trapped. Her mouth moved again, but this time I couldn't look. I left her behind. The corridor felt sterile, cold, smooth, too straight to be part of the rest of the structure. No more pulsing walls, no more organic curves, just brushed steel, sharp corners, and fluorescent lights that buzzed like real, honest electricity. The decompression shaft was at the far end, set into the floor like a maintenance hatch. Standard NATO issue. I recognized the panel layout, the oxidized handholds, even the chipped paint on the edges felt familiar. It was wrong, not in how it looked, but in the fact that it was here at all. Jules leaned against the wall opposite it, pale, shivering. Her suit had split at the seams under the armpits. Salt stains lined her collar. Her eyes wouldn't stop darting. At me, at the hatch, back to me again. "I think it's giving us an exit," she said, voice barely a whisper, like it wants us to leave. She didn't sound relieved. Neither was I. I approached the hatch slowly. Every footstep echoed down the corridor longer than it should have. The panel blinked green as I neared. Unlocked. Inviting. Inside was a narrow tube, just big enough for one person at a time, the sort used for emergency surface ascent in modular deep-sea labs. If it was real, it'd take us back to the ocean, where we'd have to manually inflate ballast and hope to avoid embolism on the way up. If it was fake, well, there were worse ways to die than getting tricked by a ghost womb. Jules stepped beside me. Her hand brushed mine, barely there. "You go first," she said. "No." "Reed?" "No. If I go first and you don't follow, I'll never know if you made it." She held my gaze. There was something behind her eyes. Not fear, doubt. She went first. Climbed down into the shaft, hands shaking on the rungs. The hatch hissed shut behind her with a sharp metallic thud. Not biological. Not wet. I waited. My heart pounded loud enough to hear in my ears. 30 seconds. 60. Nothing. Then a click. The panel blinked again. Green. My turn. I dropped into the shaft. The rungs were cold. Real. Metal scraped my gloves as I descended. About 20 feet down there was another hatch. This one opened inward. When I pushed, it gave way like a rusted door in a flooded basement, and I was back in the water. The ocean wrapped around me like a memory. Cold, crushing, familiar. I looked up. Darkness, but far, far above me, maybe half a kilometer, was light, faint, pale, the surface. I began to rise, slowly, controlled. Every meter felt wrong. My tank was half spent. My suit was slick with the fluids from the dome. I couldn't tell what was mine anymore. I passed fish that didn't scatter. They just watched. Some of them didn't even blink. One had teeth on its eyes. Halfway up, my HUD glitched. The oxygen reading flatlined. Depth indicator spun. Pressure warning chirped once and died. Then I heard breathing that wasn't mine, inside my suit. Close, wet, familiar. I stopped kicking, held still, waited. The breathing stopped. I surfaced 20 minutes later, gasping. The sky was overcast. The aurora's wake drifted maybe 30 meters off to the right. I swam hard, ignoring the cold that had finally returned to the world. When I hauled myself aboard, no one met me. The deck was empty. The instruments were still running. The navigation system blinked idle. The sonar dish slowly turned. I called for Jules. No answer. I searched the entire ship. Nothing. Not even signs she'd ever come up. Her suit wasn't in the locker. I found a boot print on the deck. Just one. It pointed toward the water and vanished. I stripped out of the suit slowly. Every movement felt alien. My skin looked normal, but my breathing didn't match my pulse. I could feel it, a lag, like the inhale and the heartbeat were out of sync. I checked my hands. They trembled. Fine. Then I looked closer. The creases in my knuckles didn't line up with the scars I remembered. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. My face looked right. Mostly, but I couldn't remember which eye had the burst blood vessel. The left? No. Right. I closed my eyes, opened them again. They weren't the same color. One was just slightly off, blue-gray, and blinking slower. I backed away, knocked a cabinet over. Then I heard something on the sonar feed. A ping, then another. I ran to the console. The signal came from below, from the trench. Something was rising, something big. I turned off the sonar. Didn't matter. It already knew where we were. I brought the ship back alone, docked it under false ID codes, said we lost pressure, claimed decompression failure. Jules was listed as lost at depth. They didn't ask many questions. No one does when the sea eats someone. Weeks later, I still hear it. The hum, the pulse, the quiet wave of a second breath right behind mine. I've had blood tests, scans. They say I'm normal, but I don't dream anymore. And sometimes when I blink too slow, I see things before they happen. Sometimes I walk past mirrors and catch myself looking the wrong way. I never saw Jules again. But 2 weeks ago, a diver was pulled from the trench near the Azores. She was alone, unarmed. She waved at the recovery sub as it approached, and she smiled. Final entry, recovered from dive log I-37. Timestamp unknown. Depth unverified. I'm not sure I ever made it out. I still taste salt when I close my mouth. The suits they grew fit better than ours ever did. If you find this, don't dive. Don't look for it. It wants to be found.